Okay, welcome to Crimes of Our Times Live. I'm proud to be a partner with Get Vocal on their True Crime Thursdays lineup. Thank you to Sonny Megatron, who also has a show, American Sex Live, on Get Vocal on Wednesday nights. Check it out. And if you do want to donate, there's a little V blue button that you could hit to donate. And on this episode of Crimes of Our Lives Live, we're going to focus on the interests of the general public when writing the killers and prisoners, and basically anyone that's incarcerated. People have been writing to serial killers and prisoners for a long time. And I'll throw this out to you guys later. John Wayne Gacy was probably, one of the first big celebrity serial killers that people started writing to and corresponding to. He wrote his own book in prison, and as did many of these serial killers. So today I'm proud to have on Bruce LeMaster and Joseph Kelly. Bruce runs the Facebook page Killers Crawl Space, and actually has helped me out in my productions as well. Bruce sent me a letter from Robin Gett of the Ripper crew here in Chicago, in which Robin Gett unequivocally stated that he never knew or worked for John Wayne Gacy, which I included that letter in my book, John Wayne Gacy Hunting a Predator. And it also puts to rest that myth that Gacy had anything to do with, Robin Gett or vice versa. So Bruce started writing the serial killers in October of 2013. And I wanted to ask you, Bruce, well, what was that like? How did you start writing the serial killers? And I understand your mom was also interested in true crime.
Yeah, that's basically how it was. She read the books, documentaries and stuff like that, but I just kind of took it further than what she did and started out writing and stuff like that, and interested in all that. And then somebody said, about writing them. I'm like, hey, I'll try it. And so I ended up writing Dana Gray, the female serial killer. And she responded back pretty quickly, but she was kind of hesitant to figuring out what I was wanting. She thought I wanted something from her, but then I kind of told her what I was doing and stuff. And then she was cool after that. Still talk to her till this day. And she sends me a lot of cool stuff.
That's interesting because, and that's another thing I'm going to ask both of you guys, what is your approach? How difficult was it when you began writing to killers or serial killers or prisoners in general? Was it sending out a letter? Did you have an address? What is that process like when you begin it?
For me, usually I have to find something. If somebody piques my interest or something, I'll write and just dig for their address and look for it and then write them. Sometimes I'll just write people to see if they write back, whether they do or not. And I just kind of just a general letter of basically reaching out saying, hey, because they get a lot of hate mail, so I try not to do that and be kind of like, I guess in a way supportive, but not in that sense for what they done.
Well, and that's what I wanted to ask you as well. I understand you've also written to Joe Exotic. Now everyone's, this #1 show, on Netflix, and actually you guys have both written them. We're going to talk to Joe about that in a moment too. And, what did the Tiger King say to you? Can you tell us the gist of your communications with him?
Yeah, I sent him an email. I was wanting to see if he could write something for my page. And he basically replied back saying that, go to his Facebook and there's a lawsuit that he filed against the feds and read it because it explains everything and let me know if you need more. And he ended up being transferred right after that. But I actually sent him a letter not too long ago to that prison to see if he'd reply back.
And is he in Fort Worth?
I believe so, yes.
Fort Worth, yeah. All right, cool. And that sounds really cool. It's pretty interesting that. How did you communicate with him? Was it via email or letter? Or?
Yeah, it was by emails, smart jail mail, I think.
Interesting. I didn't know that, they have access to email now, or, is that any different than writing them physically? Is it?
Not really. Like I talk to, they have JPay, and then the feds, they have the core links and I'm like, it's pretty easy because like JPay, you buy stamps, and if you buy a bunch, and they're actually a little bit cheaper and stuff, so it actually works out.
Oh, that's pretty cool. All right, cool. And now I'd like to introduce Joe Kelly. And Joseph Kelly is a stay-at-home dad who's been writing inmates for the last year and a half. He's written about 150, 200 different inmates, and has probably close to a dozen or so that he communicates on a daily basis. And I see he has some Rick Fisher masks behind him, and you're collectors as well. So what got you interested in writing the killers, and who was your first you wrote?
What got me into writing them is basically the same as most people, being interested in reading about them and all that type of stuff. But for me, it's actually a little bit more personal than simply just being, oh, I'm interested in this. I actually I can relate to a lot of them on a level where we have a lot of similarities in our backgrounds. Like, I had a lot of abuse growing up as a kid, and when you go through their backgrounds, a lot of the times you see all the same types of things. So that's really what got me into studying them, reading about them, writing them, all that, is all these types of shared experiences that I actually have with them.
Interesting. Because I've heard many artists and, other people say, look, if I didn't channel my art into, my anger or whatever it is into art, I could have become one of these guys too. So it's that identifying with them too. So you're not probably writing from a perspective of, oh yeah, tell me all the gory details in this. You're more.
No. Like, it's like, all right, when it comes to like all that gory, ghoulish, fiendish shit, I mean, let's face it, with the way the internet is, if you really want to know all that, it's a quick Google search away. You can get all the crime scene photos, all the autopsy reports, any fucking gory thing you want, you can get at just by typing in. There's no need to write to them to get that. And to be quite frank, most of them are not going to give you that information anyway, because they have psychiatrists, they have any number of people that they see on a daily basis that go over that with them. They don't. Most of them are not looking to write you to say, "Hey, this is what I did." That's not. You're not going to get that.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. They just want somebody to talk to, obviously. And yeah.
A sense of normalcy.
Exactly. Yeah. And did you also write to Joe Exotic?
Yeah, I wrote. I didn't email him. I actually sent him a physical letter to actually Fort Worth. And I heard back maybe like a week after I sent the letter to him. Everything in the letter to me was mostly just like some personal stuff in there. Like stuff about, I believe, what was the one husband's name? Michael. There's some stuff about him in there. Stuff I'm not necessarily comfortable repeating because it's more personal type stuff. It was him saying that basically he needs money for commissary type stuff because when he got transferred from Oklahoma to Texas, his commissary stuff, his physical stuff, did not transfer with him. They just threw it all in the garbage. So he's basically there with jack shit. So he was waiting on, somebody to give him something.
Right. And how do you guys feel about that? I'll ask this to you, Joe, first, but then we'll hit Bruce up with that. About sending them money or art supplies. How do you feel about that?
I really have no problem. Like, all right, when it comes to the correspondence thing, like, perfect example is I just started getting letters with William Howe. I don't know if you know who William Howe is. Me and him just started corresponding within the last week. He told me he has no problem corresponding back and forth with me, but he would appreciate if I could send him, say, $10, because each letter for him, because I don't do emails, like more, I know it's easier to do emails, but to me, it's more personal to sit down and actually write a physical letter to somebody than it is to sit and write a fucking email. But he said, I'll correspond, send me $10. I'll buy 7 envelopes because they're 70 cents a piece. I'll earmark them. I'll buy a bag of coffee so I can drink some coffee when I'm writing to you. I'll buy a pen and some paper. You know what I mean? And to me, if you want to correspond with them, what are you going to say? No?
Right.
No, I'm going to send you that $10. Okay, fine. He's going to say, go fuck yourself.
Exactly.
right to you then. Well, you know, because the way you put it to me, that 70 cents per envelope is a half a bag of chips, is a bar of soap, is, you know, they're living like that to where me and you aren't thinking like that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. No, I know. And I wanted to ask Bruce about that as well. How do you have you ever done that, Bruce? Have they ever asked you for money or to send them anything, or because the general public is like, not that all of the general public, but some of the general public has feelings of they should be destroyed, murder them, execute them, or they should suffer in prison. And yes, they did wrong, but tell me what you think about that too.
I've sent money to a few of them and stuff, and there's one guy I talked to, like, I've done like a lot of help for him. He actually writes books and stuff, and I've self-published them for him and helped him. He has people send me stuff to, like, sometimes it might be a check or a money order, and then I put it on to my account, and then I send it over to him, stuff like that. Like I said, I don't see no problem with it, because like with Dennis Rader and stuff, I've sent him money to help, with postage and stuff like that. And he's like, I'll send you stuff, to basically pay for it type thing.
Right. Well, yeah, there are costs involved. There's, stamps and, writing supplies or whatever there is, there's still costs involved. And again, I always tell people that if I could rewind time, my one mistake is that I called H.H. Holmes a monster, because after these serial killers or prisoners, enter the prisons, they don't turn green and they don't grow fangs and horns. They're still human beings. And I feel it's our job as a society to figure out why they've done these things.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree.
And then I wanted to jump back. We're going to jump back to Joseph for a second, because he had an interesting story about, you had a visit recently from some authorities, Joe.
Oh yeah. This is the downside of writing people. I write a lot of federal inmates as well, and at the times I was writing some of these people, I was unaware that some of them were housed in what's known as H House within AD Supermax in Florence, Colorado. And because they're housed in H House, you have to be interviewed by the FBI. You have to be on a special list. You have to go through all this stuff to talk to them, and I had like 4 or 5 letters get returned from inmates that were housed there that, again, unbeknownst to me, were housed there. So exactly 1 week ago, last Thursday, the FBI actually came to my house in the middle of the day. It was probably about 11:30, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I literally just got done making my kids lunch. I was in the kitchen cooking lunch, and a knock is on my door. My kids are yelling, "Oh, it's the mailman!" And I, look outside, and there's 2 dudes dressed, normal. So I asked them, "Can I help you?" And they identify themselves. And to be quite honest, wasn't surprised. It wasn't nothing like that, because when you start writing the federal inmates, and especially AD Supermax inmates and stuff like that, that it's a very real possibility that somebody like that is going to come pay you a visit. So when they identified themselves as the FBI, it was like, oh, all right, I guess you're here sooner than I thought you would be. We're almost like I've been expecting you type thing. So I go outside, and mind you, I'm out there talking to them, holding a bottle of fucking ketchup in my hand. Like I forgot I was even holding it. No. So I'm out there talking to them, and they really, what it is Supermax sent them to my house to tell me these, 4 or 5 people whose letters I got back, don't try to write them anymore. They're not going to get your letters. You're not going to correspond with them. And I had to let them know, like, listen, when I got those letters back, because those letters are actually signed by the warden of the Supermax saying you can't talk to these people. So I told them when I got these back, I had no intention of further pursuing them, because I got a letter from the warden saying you're not talking to them. Right. So you know what I mean? But I talked to them for maybe about an hour outside. They want to know, who else I wrote to. I write to Terry Nichols, who's housed at Supermax. We talked about Terry Nichols. We talked about the fact that I write to several mafia people. They want to know if any of the mafia people have written back. I told them that was a new kind of thing. That's within the past month I started writing to these people. And then they wanted to know the whole process of how you write, how you contact, the time frame. It was nothing intimidating or anything. It was just a friendly conversation with your neighborhood FBI guys outside.
Right.
Catch up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even when you go further back, when you go, let's say you go back to Karl Panzram's time, we're talking about, 1930s. Even Henry Lesser, who was his jail guard at the DC jail, when Panzram was transferred to Leavenworth, he was still writing him, but he had to write him under an assumed name because, he would still, probably have them asking questions about that. So I do hear those. Have you ever had something like that happen to you, Bruce, where, anything strange or unusual happen to you?
I haven't really had anybody visit me. Like, I've dealt with the FBI, but it was like work-related stuff. But I've talked to one on the phone over a local case I'm covering and stuff, and that's about it.
Talk to me about that.
Basically, she lives over the next town from me, but her name was Samantha Burns. But Chad Fawkes and Brandon Basham broke out of jail in Kentucky in November 2002. Well, they tied a guy up, stole his truck, came to West Virginia because Chad was from West Virginia. Well, they get Samantha at the Huntington Mall and drive her around ATMs and stuff, kill her, dump her, and then they go to South Carolina. They abduct an older lady at a Walmart parking lot, kill her. Then they come back to West Virginia, and then basically Brandon gets caught in, I can't remember, I think the Ohio River is where they actually finally got him. And then Chad goes to, I believe, Indiana to his brother's house, and they catch him there. Well, Samantha has never been found. And in 2009, Chad had actually led them to Alice in South Carolina with stuff that he, like maps and stuff he sent. But the police didn't actually ever believe him. Well, I started writing him in 2014, and he actually sent me a map saying where she was at and stuff. Let me see if I can get it. But I actually have this. I have blogs and everything about this. And this is basically where he's saying, like, she's down here. And he told me, she's buried by a V-shaped tree and everything. Well, the only thing that don't make sense is they've searched there. They actually brought him back here in 2013 to that location. And he could not, I guess he pointed him at the right tree, but they still couldn't find her. He still says she's there. Well, recently there were some human remains found about a mile away from where her car was found burnt. And so far, we don't know if it's her or not. I'm really attached to this case. Like, I've talked to her family and stuff. I actually, before it broke the news, a guy messaged me before it broke the news. So I knew that the remains were found 2 days prior before all of this. Well, he's kind of gave me some information here lately and said there is some unknown graves in that area. So it might not even be her. We're hoping it is, but it's kind of just waiting to see what the results are.
So they never found her remains ever?
No, well, one guy, he says that they dumped her in the Ohio River. Then Chad's the one that always says that they put her, on land and buried her. But like I said, almost 18 years ago and still nothing.
Interesting. And have you written about it on your blog or on the Killer's Crawl Space?
Yeah, the Killer's Crawl Space blog. Yeah, basically, I share my thoughts and I put include parts of his letters where he talks about it. Because here lately he was wanting money and everything. He was wanting $400 or $500 for these files that he claims to have. And I'm I got 3 kids and stuff. I'm I can't do that. And the way he is, more of kind of, because his uncle told me that, he just gets dumb women to send him money all the time. So I didn't do that. Well, since the remains were found, he started writing me again. So he kind of changed his whole tone about it. And now he's all all for me basically and trying to help and talk to me and everything. But he actually broke the news in this last letter. He said that the remains, he said it wasn't her at all. And he was trying to tell, he said it was another lady, but he wouldn't give me a name or nothing. So I'm not sure what to make. I wrote him back the other day, so I'm waiting on a reply to see what he was talking about.
So he sent you that map.
Yes, that his, he's got handwriting. And I have it on like I think the first part of it, but you can see where he like took probably a marker and like drew a line and said she's down in here, and talked about it was a V-shaped tree that Brandon marked it at the bottom with a shovel, and let's see, she's buried in a tarp, and the ravine's about knee deep, and they buried her about knee deep, which I've been to that site, and there's a lot of V-shaped trees in that area, and if she is there, I might have pinpointed where she's at, but I don't know exactly if that place was searched in that exact spot or not.
So did the FBI come after you because he sent you that?
Well, I talked to, we had a thing happen a couple years ago. A guy basically went Facebook Live and said that Samantha was buried in his wife's backyard, and this was over in Ohio. Well, everybody started messaging me all over the place because that's where they found my blogs and was looking into it. Well, I talked to the FBI agent that was over the case, and he said he would do some stuff. Well, it turned out he didn't. And I talked to him not too long ago because there was a tip that was sent in at the end of last year. And when I talked to him, he knew who I was and everything. So I don't know if he's actually read my blogs or just remembered me from previous time.
Very interesting. Very cool. Very cool. So now let's talk to Joseph. So, Joe, I heard Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was kind of boring. He would just ask, how's AC/DC doing? And, he had a foot fetish and, but who has been the most interesting that you have written and also the most dull?
Man. I mean, like the ones that I actually enjoy talking to the most would be like Terry. Terry Nichols is an interesting person to talk to. Richard Deger is an interesting person to talk to. Robin Getch, I talk to. I find him to be an interesting person to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
William Howe, just from the first letter,
right?
Seems like this could be a interesting relationship.
Tell our viewers, more about him.
He's kind of it almost struck me like the letter was like, and this is gonna sound weird, but it was almost like Hannibal Lecter, like when he was like the quid pro quo, where you have to, give me a little bit and I'll give you a little bit type of thing. That's like the game that right now he wants to play, which the questions he's asking, I have no problem answering and talking about.
And have you seen that a lot? Because Gacy would do that. Gacy would send out like a questionnaire that everyone would have to fill out at first. And
I mean, like there's, all right, like after you make it, I call it first contact. Like after you make your initial contact with them, if they happen to decide to write you back, most of them, as Bruce pointed out earlier, there's like a feeling out process where they want to see exactly who you are, what do you want from them, all that type of stuff. Like Richard Deirdre wrote me back, and his first thing was, "You're not some like religious person, are you? That's trying to like," and it was like, "Nah, I'm just trying to write you." And then he was like, "All right, well, it was off and running after that." I mean, there's other people like Roby, Kevin Roby, like right. When I wrote him, he really wasn't interested in any type of like back and forth talking. It was like just this crazy fucking I'm satanic Christ. I'm trying to write a book. I need somebody that's gonna help me see through this book, and if you can help me, cool. If you know somebody that can help me, cool. If not, basically I don't need to hear back from you, type of thing. Which I actually did pass. I did pass him off on to somebody. I passed him off on to Nico. I don't know whether Nico did anything for him. You know what I'm talking about? Klaus?
Yeah, Nico.
Yeah, I passed him off on to him because that's the first person that came to mind.
That's hilarious. Well, again, it's a small crowd. We all know each other,
Yeah, and I said, I don't know if I'm going to hell for connecting them two together or what, but that's yeah. But I mean, it's like some of them are really boring though. Like I wrote to one guy named Will Spears. I don't write to him anymore because he's a boring guy. Who else? Roy Norris really wasn't that interesting of a person.
Right.
There's a lot of them like that. Like even Hayden Clark. Like I write to Hayden a lot. Hayden's like, yeah. Sometimes he'll say something interesting. Sometimes it's Robert Barter's another one where it's
yeah.
There's a lot of them are like that. It's it's mundane most of the time. It's not no salacious stuff that most people want. Like the closest to what most people would really want writing a serial killer that I ever talked to was Jablonski. That's the if you wanted to write to a serial killer and be like, damn, I just talked to a for real serial killer, Jablonski, because it would go for a paragraph or two. Hey, how you doing? Answering your questions real nice. And then it goes, hey, let me tell you a story. And then it goes right into this graphic all out. Hey, this is what I did to this person. Oh, you know what? Telling you this reminds me that I used to love doing this to this. But like, it just went batshit crazy for another like 18 pages after that. And that's just that would be the closest to what most people, if they wanted some ghoulish shit, Jablonski would have been the closest.
Interesting. Yeah. And I see, Bruce, nodding his head. So, talk about some of the people you've written, Bruce, and some of those experiences. Huh?
Yeah, I agree with Philip. He was really out there. I knew one letter, when that people are leaving their kids in their car and stuff, and they were dying from the heat.
Right.
He was telling me one day, it was right when all that first started happening, it was real big. He kind of was like, oh, if I seen that, if a kid was in a car, I would break the window and get the kid out. Well, then it goes into like a full story of he would pimp the kid out and do all this stuff. I'm like, what? It was so. Speaking of, like, when he sent me his hair one day, I wasn't like I talked to him about it because I seen where somebody else, and he actually cut his. I don't know if it's his hair on his head or what, but when I opened the letter, it fell out on me into my lap and like scared me half to death. So, but yeah, he's definitely one that you actually got, like, whatever you ask him, you got it from him. I've noticed with Chad and stuff, like I was talking about earlier, he's kind of told me stuff that they've done, with Samantha and Alice. And I talked to Tim Hoffner. He told me in a letter kind of like the situation what happened to him. But yeah, a lot of them don't really talk. They more just your basic conversation of what's going on in the world and stuff like that. Some of them, like he said, might say a few things interesting, but a lot of them are just your normal, maybe like talking to your family type thing every day.
Right. And I mean, obviously, what do you feel they're getting out of it? Obviously just a pen pal, somebody to write, somebody to, in a sense, talk to, right?
Yeah, like I used to write. Well, he got executed though. Bobby Joe Long. Like I talked to him for a good bit. Like he was sending me letters, like in between letters. But I wrote him because he was actually from West Virginia, and trying to think. He was more in about like any woman that you had in your life. He wanted like personal information about them, like everything. And what was actually weird, I read a book on him, and they actually listed the address on his driver's license from when he lived in West Virginia. Crazy thing is, I went, I think, to Kentucky to do a paranormal investigation. When I came back, I drove through Huntington, and I found the house that he lived in. Crazy thing is, his mom still lived there, and she was outside at like 3 o'clock in the morning trying to get her cat in. I don't know if she's still alive now, but she was like 83, 84 then. And it was kind of creepy. I'd kind of boogied out because what I'd done, I had driven there like 5 or 6 times, just going back and forth. I'm like, I think that's it. And then last time I went by, she was there, and I'm like, well, crap, she might be wondering why I'm just circling the area.
You know, I've heard stories like that before where people will go and see people throwing garbage out from, like, you know, the wife of a serial killer, and they go and they find all of this treasure trove out there. Yay, Ashleigh's here. All right. Okay. Hi, Ashleigh.
That was a chore. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you. Okay,
I was
cool.
about to stroke out trying to get that room to load. So, hi, everybody.
Hi, Ashleigh. So, welcome, Ashleigh Keto-Johnson. Ashleigh's 32 years old, and she started writing serial killers when she was 17. And Ashleigh also visits serial killers in prison. So she's very brave. She's been writing Dennis Rader, who is also known as BTK, which stands for Bind, Torture, and Kill. Rader was a serial killer who murdered 10 victims in the Wichita, Kansas area between 74 and 91. And then when he resurfaced in the 2000s, he began taunting authorities, and that ultimately led to his capture. I was involved in that case a little bit because the authorities had sent me a subpoena for my records of everyone in Wichita who purchased the DVD of H.H. Holmes, America's First Serial Killer, because Dennis Rader was obsessed with H.H. Holmes. So talk to me about how you began to first start writing Dennis Rader. How did that come about?
Well, I had thought about it for a couple of years and just kept putting it off. And I have a friend that lives in California that's big into all of this stuff. And he's like, well, I'll send you an address. And he's like, you know, shoot him a letter. He may or may not write you back. Probably not. So sat down and wrote just the front of one page and told him a little bit about myself, what I liked. And I actually got a reply 9 days later. So.
Oh, that's really interesting. Wow. And that reply, was there like a vetting process in that? Did he, you know, like we're talking about, some of these killers want you to send them some information first and they have questions for you. How was that a process for you, or was it pretty simple?
It was a fairly simple process. In the reply, it was very much a form letter. You could tell that he already had like the layout printed up for that and just filled in my name and my address and was like, thank you for your input. And then he'll point out a few things that you have in common guard at the time. So that really piqued his interest. And I had a dog, and for whatever reason, he really liked that. But at the time that I began writing him, he requested that I wait 2 months to write him again because he was so overwhelmed with mail. And so I waited the 2 months and I wrote him back. And then after that, I'd say about 6 months later, we started talking on the phone. And about 8 months after that first letter, I had my first visit with Dennis Rader.
Wow. Yeah. You know, and many people don't realize that, you know, these are celebrity serial killers. They've got, like you said, a backlog of all these people writing to them. People are fascinated and interested in their stories. But what I wanted to ask you, though, you know, being a female, has that, you know, presented any drawbacks or positive aspects when you're writing to these serial killers? Obviously, if they're male, I mean, if you write to John Wayne Gacy, he probably wouldn't give a shit. He'd probably want to talk, you know,
Exactly.
to me when I was like 19. But, you know, how has being a female, has that helped you at all write to these serial killers?
I think that it has helped, especially when you send nice pictures of yourself. The only time that I found that being a female helped having a pen pal relationship with Randy Kraft. So he wasn't interested in writing me because I was a female. But other than that, I feel like females have the upper hand when it comes to writing male serial killers in prison.
And when you went to visit him, what was that like? Dennis Rader.
I was very nervous the first time. And unfortunately, it's, you know, he's housed in segregation, so he does have video visits. But I remember being so nervous. They're hour-long visits, and I travel almost 600 miles one way to get there, and I was just so nervous. And the prison is kind of creepy. It's kind of just feels like it draws the life out of you when you get there a little bit. But you just go in this little tiny booth, and they take him to up from his cell, and they shackle him to a chair and shackle his arms to the desk, and you're able to see him from about the shoulders up. And but Dennis Rader is very much like your grandfather next door. He's funny. He doesn't curse. He's very corny. He's always inquiring on how the trip was. How are you? Are you being safe? Things. So it was a pleasant experience. I still get nervous when I go visit him, though.
And again, it's always interesting because, a lot of the general public doesn't experience this, and they're fascinated by all of you and what I'm doing, and they want to hear more about it. So, and maybe we could all chime in, actually, I think we could get back to, Joseph and, talk about, any recent, I think you talked about one recently, that you've written, but, any other, recents or high profiles that you've written?
That I've written to, or that have actually written me back? Because that's two different.
Oh, that's
two different,
right,
two different
right.
subjects. Because I mean, like,
that's true. Now, why wouldn't they write you back? Because you think they're just not interested? Like Ashleigh said, maybe, they're into, females, or they just don't want to write, or what? Why wouldn't they write you back?
I mean, it could be any number of things. It could be the whole tone of your letters wrong, like in Joe Dirt with Christopher Walken and shit, where he's like, oh, this is the wrong. It could be like that. You came at him all wrong.
Yeah.
You could be writing about a subject matter he give a fuck less about, so that's why you're not hearing back. It could be people like how, sorry, like in the last month, right? I've written maybe almost at least a dozen mafia people, right?
Right.
That's like, a 50-50 shot whether you're going to hear back from them or not, because they're mafia. Maybe you're going to hear, maybe you're not. It's basically a crapshoot. Like, you send a letter and take a chance, and maybe you hear back. Like when sometimes it's nothing when you hear back. Like I had Alfred Gaynor write me back, and all he did when he write me back was bitch about his toe, because he's got fucking, what's that shit in your toe? Gout. Bitching because he had gout in his toe, and wanted to sell me some art. And that was it. And I wrote him back and told him the point of me writing wasn't to buy some art from you. I wasn't one of them people, and I never heard back from him. Steve Jesperson was another one. I wrote me back, told me I was funny, said, hey, why don't you buy some art from me? I'm writing to buy you fucking $200 piece of art. Like, that's not why I'm writing.
Exactly. And sometimes they may specifically want something from you, because that's what Jesperson, he wrote me and said he wanted me to make a movie about him. So some time went by, and then I wrote him, and we spoke for a year, but because I never sent him money, it got to a certain point where he said, you know what, I'm just not interested. Somebody else is doing this. And, he led me along too, so that's what they do, right? I mean,
trying to, that you got to always remember they're in their situation, that they're going to maximize whatever they can get, or at least I can't say all of them,
right.
There's a good portion that will. Some genuinely, I don't think are being malicious, like Terry. That's why I enjoy writing to Terry. Writing to him is not, I want something from you. It was essentially, are you willing to talk about X, Y, or Z? Or like, he asked me if I wanted to talk about the Bible with him. Now, mind you, I'm not like a super religious person. I said, all right, you want to talk about the Bible, Terry? Sure.
Right.
So he wrote me some questions. I wrote him back, and then it became just a philosophical discussion.
That's fascinating to me. I mean, of course I'd be interested in writing, some more, inmates and serial killers, but that would fascinate me, the philosophical discourse. And, again, the gore and stuff, like you said, we could get that from the news and the internet. We don't need that. I want to know what they're feeling and thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically what it is. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. And now I want to ask Bruce. So Bruce, what would you recommend if people wanted to write a serial killer, an inmate? How would you recommend they go about that? I mean, what are like the steps? I mean, let's say somebody said, "Oh, I want to write, pick one," and how would they go about it? I mean, not exactly how to write that specific one, but how do they find out? Do they go to a website? Are there addresses?
Like I usually just search like whatever state they're in, and like do like inmate search. Say they're in California, I do California inmate search, and then it'll type in their name and stuff, and then find them, and then basically to write them. They're like, for me, I'm just myself, so I show them. I'm just more interested to being a friend, let them pass time. And I just tell them, stuff about me and see because I know me doing paranormal stuff, that really because that was one thing Dennis was interested in where I'd done paranormal stuff. And there's some other ones that are very, really interested in stuff talking to me about, because some of the prisons, got ghosts and stuff possibly, and they'll talk about it and stuff like that. So I find that stuff interesting as well. Which one thing with Bobby, he was actually in prison with Ted Bundy back in the day. And he was talking about like where Ted Bundy was pretty much the only person in there that he could have intelligent conversation with, and he played racquetball and volleyball with them. Well, there's a story that, Ted Bundy haunts that prison, and he said that was basically BS. That's just guards just done it just for attention type thing.
Well, and again, it's always interesting to find out some of this information because now I'm working on the Gacy film, obviously, and I'm working with all the detectives and the prosecutors that were involved with the case. And there's always a difference between what the media reports, the truth, and what the investigators know. And, all of us are kind of finding out this inside information. If you want to comment on that, and then maybe Joseph will too, as when you were sent that map.
Yeah, like that's what I kind of like said with that whole case. Like some of the local ones, like I've done, like me and my fiance's done like live videos of like other local cases and stuff, and it's really getting out there talking to people about it and seeing where stuff goes. But like with that one, like I said, I'm so involved in it, talking with her family and talking to like her friends and stuff from high school, and actually because Brandon never would write nobody. Well, what I done was one of the inmates I talked to actually write other inmates using a fake name. Well, they actually done that, used my address. He wrote back. And I only got like 2 letters back from him, but it ended up not panning out like I hoped. But I was wanting to see if he would talk that way.
Right. Yeah. And I want to ask Joe, is that, are there, like you said, there are certain ways you approach them, but you come at this with inside information. So you kind of know, where these killers might be in prisons, but how would you recommend, let's say somebody said, "Hey, I want to write one of these." How do they begin?
From simplest form, if you want to write somebody, the first thing you got to find out is, number one, are a state or a federal inmate, because there's 2 different systems. If they're a state inmate, find out what state they're in. You go to the state website, the Department of Justice website, if you know their name. There's an inmate finder on there. Type their name in, their number pops up, boom. It'll tell you what facility they're at. Look up the facility. Make sure you look at what the mailing address is, any procedures that you need to follow, and yada, yada, yada. And you're off and running. If they're a federal inmate, there's a federal website. You go there, type their name in. Same shit pops up with their number, facility at the bottom. But with that one, you can click on the facility, take you right there, mailing address, the whole 9 yards. And that's basically, as far as finding out where they're at and all that. It's as easy as that. Like, it's not rocket science. It's not. There's no mystery to it. It's that easy. It's public. It's public information. You know, the only way you're going to have a problem is if, like, say you want to write to a inmate in the UK. The UK has laws that aren't like ours. Their information about inmates is not public. Like, there's actually a form you have to fill out with your name, like who you are, what you want, if you represent an organization, why you want to talk to them. And then they have to approve it, the form to go to the inmate, and then the inmate approves whether or not you get their information. And then you can start corresponding from there. Otherwise, to get like a UK inmate, say you don't want to fill out the form, maybe go search and see if somebody else has written to them. Maybe they have a picture of the letter somewhere, or a video of them reading it, and you can quick grab a screenshot of it. Now, boom, you're in business, and you can start writing. I've seen somebody do that with Rosemary West and get a letter from the UK government telling them, do not ever write here again. Like, do not attempt to contact her again.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's really, it's, you know, finding the right tone, finding the right common ground to communicate. Like, Joe Druce, right, wrote me back real excited because I mentioned Gigi Allen in a letter. And apparently Joe Druce rode a bus with Gigi Allen from New York to Cincinnati.
Wow.
And he said the whole time Gigi had a fat marker writing like Gigi rules or some shit like that on everything he could find and see. And he said they drank at a bar and hung out and rode the bus together for however many states. So, I mean, it's you don't know what could make somebody write back. Like, right. I wrote Berkowitz over and over and over and over, never heard anything. Changed the tone of my letter to more of a, again, even though I'm not religious, I brought more religious shit up. Suddenly, I got a letter from his handlers. Oh, David got your letter. He wants to say blah, 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 blah. Same shit with Gary Ridgway. Wrote him over and over and over. Decided, you know what? Let me approach him the same way I did Berkowitz. Suddenly, boom, got a letter from Ridgway's handlers. Oh, Gary got your letter. Blah, 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 blah. Like, you never know. It's really getting to know the person that you're trying to write. Do your homework. Right,
exactly. You know, and that's like we were talking with Ashleigh, you know, if you know, the serial killer was killing, you know, was male and killing females, then okay, a female may be better to approach them. Who knows? You know, and like you're saying, hit or miss. But who could someone write now that you would think, yeah, they write back to everybody? Is there like one? I mean,
probably Robert Bardo. You want a letter back? Write Bardo. He'll
Robert
probably write back in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Let's see. Does Bruce? What do you think, Bruce? Anybody that you could think of right now that would write back? Definitely write back.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Joseph on that. Which before that, when Philip was alive, Philip would write anybody back.
Yeah.
You were guaranteed a letter from him.
And who else says Ashleigh? Have you written any other serial killers or criminals, Ashleigh?
I have. At one point, I was writing 13 people at once. So it was a lot. I would say if somebody wants a letter back from someone, I would definitely write Wayne Henley. He writes everybody back. He used to write Bobby Joe Long. I was very devastated when he was executed. Let's see. I write several people in San Quentin, and I visit a few people out there. I was also supposed to visit Roy Norris like 3 weeks after he passed, so I was pretty sad about that too. So
yeah. And you know, you had mentioned earlier too, you know, about, you know, I'm just fascinated, as many people are, by this duality, you know, and we'll talk about, you know, Dennis Rader again, and that, you know, when you talk to him, you know, you have said it's just like talking to a grandfather, and yeah. You know, and that was like Albert Fish too. You know, he was this kind old man that everyone thought, but you know, he never swore to his children, never touched them, hurt them physically. Talk about how Dennis is, and how people would never believe if you were talking to this guy what he did.
Dennis is seriously like the guy next door. Like, he calls me at least twice a week. He's always checking on me. He'll ask about my pets, my boyfriend, or, the weather. Like, we talk like I was talking to my grandpa, and he doesn't curse. He's very, I don't know. He's a really good friend. He sends me birthday cards when I'm sick. He sends me get well cards. He'll do little drawings for me. Apart from the obvious of what he's in there for, he's a really nice guy. Like, I would have him over to my house for dinner. If they were going to let him out of prison for a weekend, I would trust Dennis Rader in my house. I really would.
And we hear that, from a lot of people on the duality, again, and we go back to, some of the greats like BTK. And when I say greats, they were great at what they did. John Wayne Gacy, they did what they got away with it for a long time, and they were great at what they did, again, they're fascinated by that duality, how they can hold these normal lives while they're doing these, awful acts.
Sure.
Have you written to anyone else recently other than Rader?
Recently, the most person I was writing was Roy Norris. I still write a couple people in San Quentin. They're not as well known. I write Wesley Shermantine and Martin Kipp out there. And I also did write Philip, but as we know, he passed away also. So they're just dropping flies lately. So.
But being a female, do you ever have any fear that, oops, I think we lost Ashleigh. I was going to ask her if she had any fear. But, maybe I could ask you guys about that, because I have heard, Joseph, if you want to comment on this, I've heard stories of where certain female writers had a death, threat put on them by a prisoner in prison. Have you had any weird things like that with the actual serial killers or prisons, or heard stories of that? Like they got people outside?
You hear all the you shouldn't write all right. When I write to them, I use my real name. I don't use, fake names or nothing. I don't have a P.O. box. Everything that comes to me comes to my house. I know there's a lot of people probably say, oh, that's so stupid and blah, 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 blah. In reality, what it becomes, a lot of the people I'm writing, are they ever getting out? No. So am I worried was I worried that Philip Jablonski was going to show up on my doorstep? Fuck no. As a matter of fact, I don't know whether you guys read it. Philip had there was a letter published somewhere where he outlined this escape attempt plan that he had. It was the most Wile E. Coyote shit I've ever heard in my life. He had calculated where it was 5,000 something rubber bands he was going to get, and he was going to attach them to the cell bars, and it was going to bend the bars, and he was going to get out, and then he was going to unattach those from the bars and build a giant human-sized slingshot with him, and the other inmates were going to use that to shoot him over the fucking fence in the wall. Am I worried about Jablonski accomplishing that and coming to my house? No. He's not coming here. So and am I worried about, them having some groupie that they're going to send to my house to come do something? No. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I'm home 24 hours a day. If you really want to come to my house, come to my house. Come to my house.
Yeah.
If you really want some shit, you can come to my house, but you won't leave. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'll be like Casey. You be in the basement that we're in right now under the concrete. You're not leaving. So.
I hear you. And Bruce, what do you think about that? Have you ever worried about anything that, that's what I tell people when people say, I've only been written by Jesperson and the Starved Rock Killer, Chester Weger. But then people say, aren't you worried? I said, they're not getting out. Chester's out now, but come on, we know he's, an elderly man. But, when you're writing like BTK and some of these other people, do you ever was there ever a time where you felt, afraid for your life or something could happen to you?
Not really. I'm with Joseph on that. I use my, real address, and people go crazy when they're like, oh, how do you do that? I'm like, I actually kind of wonder if that actually works better using your own address, because they know you're not lying to them. So I personally have never felt afraid. When I visited Tim in Ohio in Chillicothe. Now that was interesting because when I was the first time I went, I was the only one in there, so they brought him in. The second time I went, he was already chained to the floor, well, shackled. And well, the inmates are supposed to walk on the other side of the table. Well, one of them actually walked behind me and cut back, and they were like flipping out. The COs were, because he wasn't supposed to walk on that side. He was probably a foot maybe from me, but I still wasn't really scared at it. I was more or less looking at everybody else in the room so I could get a visual picture of them and then look them up later to see what they done. So that's about like the only thing I would maybe a little bit. That's about it though.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask Ashleigh the same question. Did you ever, Ashleigh, feel, afraid, that anything could happen to you, either going to the prison or something on the outside because of them?
Something going to or outside of, I was terrified of my first death row visit in San Quentin. That would probably be the only time that I've ever been like fearful of a.
And who is that?
I visited with Martin Kipp. He's about 6'4", about 300 pounds. He's a big guy, like muscular guy, and they lock you in these cages. There may be 4x4 cages on death row visiting at San Quentin, and you're locked in there with them for 5 hours if you're coming a long distance. And I just remember like being if for some reason they were going to try to harm you while you were in there, one guard's not going to come and get you out. They have to wait for an extraction team to come in there and get you. So that's probably the only time that I've been terrified as far as anything to do with a visit. I try to just kind of lay low and stuff like that so people don't know like what I'm in town for. But
right. Very cool. And what began your interest though in, writing to these guys? You mentioned, a friend of yours knew, I had written a Raider, but I mean, were you always interested in true crime?
As long as I can remember. I can remember being like 12, 13 years old, and that was like the only thing I wanted to watch on TV. And I was just like not fascinated like people are, killing people, but like how could such normal people do these kind of things and get away with it for so long? I mean, like, they're a husband, they're this, they're that in the community, and all along they're leading this double life. And I wanted to see what it was like to maybe kind of get in their head, or just kind of see if they would want to be friends with somebody like me or so. And the first person I wrote was Peter Sutcliffe, and that was when I was 17 years old. I got a couple of responses from him, and then that just kind of faded off. So I just branched out and started writing other people.
Interesting. And before we wrap up, I'm going to ask everybody a question, and you as well, Ashleigh. Some people are definitely out there for profit, and this is America. We could do that. There are people that buy and sell this stuff, and that's fine. How do you feel about that? Have you ever done that?
I have never done that. Everything that I've ever received, once I read it, I put it in. I have a giant antique trunk, and the items are for me. Like, they're special to me, and I have no desire to sell them. I've never sold anything. I'm very picky on who I even show the things to.
Okay. Yeah. And so let's see, Joseph, do you just collect and keep, or do you also trade? Some people trade, it's not necessarily about money. I know this stuff gets around, and I've seen, pieces go from one collector to another, to another, to another. And it's just like, hey, I got this one. You have that one. I'll trade you for this.
Anything that's personally like addressed to me, no, I don't sell any of that stuff. Definitely not letters, not envelopes, not nothing like that. The only stuff that generally I might buy would be something that either the person is dead, so you can't write them, or somebody that's just notoriously fickle, that they just don't write anybody. Say like an Ed Kemper that just doesn't write anyone. Then maybe I would consider buying something like that. But otherwise, I'm not big on buying letters that belong to other people, because for the cost of an envelope, I could just write them and get my own fucking letter. What do I need to pay $100 and something for. But
Yeah.
I mean, like I've traded like for Hayden Clark, right?
Oops, I'm sorry. Okay, so it looks like we're here, and the show is definitely going to be on next week. Next up is Crimes and Cults. So everyone, definitely enjoy. Thank you, everyone, for being on, and we're out. Take care.